This video is going to be a crash course in plyometric movements, how and why we do them, how to progress them, and what exactly plyometrics are and are not. We're going to treat this video as an FAQ, so frequently asked questions style of video. If you're interested in a certain aspect of this video, you can just skip ahead in the chapters below. First off, what are plyometric movements? Plyometric movements are just jumps, hops, skips, and bounds, governed and driven by the stretch shortening cycle. To get people to visualize the stretch shortening cycle, I get them to think of a band or a coiled spring, and the harder we pull that band or the harder we compress that spring with, the faster and with more force that spring or band is going to rebound back. The stretch shortening cycle is a pre-stretch or counter movement that we see in everyday movements that improve force and power production and get us moving more quickly. The stretch shortening cycle is comprised of three phases: the eccentric phase, the amortization phase, and the concentric phase. The eccentric phase is the loading phase where we load the tendon elastically. Some people will refer to this phase as the absorption phase or the deceleration phase. The amortization phase is where we dynamically stabilize between the eccentric loading phase and the concentric takeoff phase. If we spend too much time in this phase, we lose the potential to produce a lot of elastic energy. Lastly is the concentric phase where we unload that elastic energy and produce a concentric muscle contraction. A good demonstration that we can use in the gym that shows how important that stored elastic energy is comparing a squat jump to a counter movement jump. A squat jump, we're pausing at the bottom of your squat, so we're taking away that elastic energy and jumping up. With the counter movement jump, we're using that stored elastic energy and we're going to rebound up quite a bit higher. Plyometrics are not ballistic movements. Sometimes there's some crossover between the two of them, and sometimes there's confusion between the two of them as well. So a true plyometric movement is going through that full phase, that eccentric, amortization, and concentric phases. And a ballistic movement, we're just accelerating through the concentric movement. So if you're doing like a medicine ball throw or just a seated box jump, those are not true plyometric movements. Those are ballistic movements. And again, there are some crossover between the two of them. For the most part, I may just call them plyometric movements to make it easier with my athletes, but I do want to distinguish between the two for the sake of this video. So why is it important to train plyometrics? Well, for my athletes, we know there's a direct carryover from doing plyometrics that improve your muscular power and force. And there's also direct sport performance indicators like sprint speed, jump height, and change of direction time that are improved from adding plyometrics into your program. For my general population and my older clients, plyometrics are important as well. If we don't use a certain skill, we're going to lose it as we get older. And I see a lot of calf and hamstring strains in parents that are going out with their kids playing soccer or basketball, whatever their sport may be, that are put into situations where they have to use their bodies in these specific skill sets when they're not ready for it. So I always preach to my clients, even just through warm-up, get those low-level plyometrics in your program, like pogo jumps, to help build your tendon resiliency so you don't end up with a minor injury. So next we get into how to program your plyometric exercises. Plyometrics have always been tough for athletes to program themselves simply because the single exercise is dictated by how intense the plyometric should be done. Take a pogo jump, for example. I have my athletes do low intense variations of these every time they're in the gym. Great for movement prep and blood flow to the lower leg. I would, however, not want them doing a higher intensity version of these pogo jumps every day due to the high demand they're going to place on our bodies. This is why we should categorize plyometrics into intensive and extensive plyometric movements. Extensive plyometrics are characterized by low intensity, high volume movements that are used to build tissue and tendon resiliency. We think of these as our skips and our bounds and our jumps that we use to warm up our athletes in the gym. On the other hand, intensive plyometrics are high intensity, low volume movements that we use to build our power output and rate of force development with our athletes. So with these, we think of your traditional plyo movements like depth jumps and hurdle jumps, and I also like to place single leg jumps in here as well because they're very taxing on our athletes. So when are people ready to add plyometric movements to their workouts? I believe the vast majority of people can and should be doing these low intensity, extensive plyometrics daily as movement prep and as warm up for their workouts. To see if people are ready for these more advanced plyometrics like depth jumps and hurdle jumps, we can get them to perform a simple clat test. What a clat test is you're jumping off an implement 4 to 6 inches off the ground, landing on one leg, and we're looking for the athlete to dynamically stabilize on that leg. If we see an athlete land with too much knee valgus, like their knee caves in, or generally they're just very unstable at the knee, ankle, or hip, we should probably dial them back and work on some structural balance issues before we move them onto these advanced plyometrics. Most young athletes can get right into them. And again, we just have to be a bit cautious, maybe keep the hurdles low, the depth jump, if we're doing that, keep the box a bit lower, just so we don't overextend their capabilities. Now the clat test can be a little subjective, so I want you to use your best coaching judgment here when determining if athletes should move on or not. Obviously, they're going to be a little unstable. It is a failure test. Of course, if they're falling over or can't stabilize at all, they're probably not ready. If there's a little instability there, they're probably okay to go on. So how can we tell if an athlete is progressing in their plyometric movements? We do something called testing their reactive strength index. All the RSI tests is their flight time divided by their ground time. So as they get more advanced in their plyometrics and they're more efficient in utilizing that stretch shortening cycle, their RSI will improve. We do this by testing a repeated 10-5 hop test on our force plates. Some will use this test to see if their athletes are ready for more advanced plyometrics, like the clat test, but not all gyms and coaches will have access to this type of technology. The question I get asked most often is, how do I program these plyometric exercises into my workout? And I always tell people there's two options. You can have one athletic day that's just comprised of plyometric movements, or you can spread them out throughout the week. Personally, I like to spread them out throughout the week. I like to do 1 or 2 plyometric movements every workout I'm in the gym before my big lifts. If you are doing a full day of plyometrics, what I like to do is get those extensive low-level plyometrics in first, and we're going to do 2 to 3 exercises, about 20 to 40 ground contact times for each one. So in that category, we're looking at pogo jumps and A skips, B skips, any of your track warm-ups, any of your ankle health exercises, those all fit here. So after that, we're going to move into your intensive plyometrics. With your intensive plyometrics, again, I want you to think of low sets and low reps. So maybe 2 to 3 sets of about 2 to 4 reps each. What we're looking for here is I want 1 of each category. So I want you to do 1 jump for force production, 1 jump for minimizing ground contact time, 1 jump that changes planes of movement. So we think of maybe a lateral jump to broad jump, and 1 jump with single leg work. So we're thinking maybe a single leg box jump or single leg broad jump. Each of those 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 4 reps. The problem that I have with putting all of the plyos into one day is usually my athletes will slow down at a certain point. So what we want for all of these movements is you want to be moving quickly. If you feel like you're ever moving slowly in these intensive plyometric movements, I want you to dial them back or just shut the workout down. We don't want to be practicing bad movement patterning, and we don't want you to be practicing these plyometric movements slowly. Saying all that, if you're a jumping athlete like a basketball or volleyball player, I wouldn't want you doing these type of workouts in season. You're going to be getting a lot of these demands from your games and practices, so we don't want to create any overuse injuries. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of what plyometrics are and are not and how to program them going forward. Again, these are just general guidelines I use. I want everything to be individualized for you. If you feel like you can tolerate more work during your plyometric workouts, then add another set or a few more reps. If you feel like it's too much, dial it back. Everything should be individualized in the gym, especially plyometric movements. Again, if you feel like you're moving slowly, dial it back. We want you producing as much force and power as you can every single workout and attacking the workout as much as you can. So let me know if you think I missed anything in the comments or anything else you'd like to learn about plyometric movements. I can make another video or I'll reply to you in the comments. And if you're a beginner athlete in the gym and not sure what to do for warm-up, I'm going to link my warm-up video here for my beginner athletes. It'll take you through the exercises and get you prepped for your big lifts in the gym.